All right, let's get right into it. We're looking at a super tense situation playing out on the high seas, specifically the Strait of Hormuz. What's happened is the U.S. has seized an Iranian ship, and that single act has just lit a fuse. We're talking threats of retaliation, diplomatic talks getting torpedoed, and the whole region inching closer to a major conflict. So let's break down exactly what went down.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? Is this whole thing about to blow up? I mean, after Iran made those threats, that's what everyone is asking. And, when things are this shaky, we absolutely have to understand how we even got here in the first place.
So, to really get a handle on this, we've got to rewind a little bit and look at what happened over the weekend. Let's piece it all together.
Okay, so everything kicks off in a place that's already a massive global hotspot, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, this is one of the most critical shipping lanes on the planet. And yeah, this is ground zero for the confrontation.
So how did it happen? Well, it looks like it went down in 3 pretty quick, pretty aggressive steps. First, you have this Iranian-flagged cargo ship trying to get through a U.S. blockade. Then, the U.S. Navy actually fires on the ship. And finally, step 3, U.S. forces board the vessel and take total control. Pretty dramatic stuff.
Yeah, you can't really do something like that and not expect a reaction, right? And sure enough, Iran's response came fast. And they were not holding back with their words either. So, you get this statement from Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the really elite, powerful part of their military. And they came out and called it a blatant act of aggression. I mean, that's about as strong as it gets. It sounds like they're getting ready to hit back hard. But then, there was silence. Nothing. And this really gets to the heart of the whole problem. You've got 2 completely different stories about the same event. The U.S. says, hey, we were just enforcing a blockade. But Iran sees it as a straight-up act of aggression, an attack. And when you have 2 sides that see things so differently, well, that's when things get really, really dangerous.
So that's the big mystery here, isn't it? If Iran was so fired up and ready to retaliate, why didn't they? Why the pause? Well, the answer is pretty unexpected, and it adds this really human twist to what feels like a giant geopolitical chess game.
It turns out a key piece of information started coming out from Iranian sources. And get this, there were apparently family members of the crew on that ship. Their presence is believed to be the single factor that prevented an immediate and violent escalation, as it likely limited Iran's military options. But, and this is a huge but, just because they held back doesn't mean the danger has passed. Not at all. In fact, Iranian officials are making it crystal clear that retaliation isn't a question of if it's going to happen, but when. Okay, so we've got this military standoff simmering. Let's pull back for a second and look at the diplomatic side of things, because the timing of this whole incident, wow, it really couldn't have been worse.
It really felt like there was this tiny window of opportunity opening up for some communication, some diplomacy. And then, bam, this seizure happens, and it just throws a wrench in the whole thing. All those fragile efforts are basically on the verge of falling apart now.
And I mean, you can draw a straight line from one event to the other. Look at the timeline. This week, there were supposed to be new talks between the U.S. and Iran in Islamabad. But then the ship seizure happens over the weekend. And what's the result? Iran says, nope, we're not coming. Just like that, the diplomatic option is off the table.
So what you're left with is total diplomatic chaos. And that's the scary part, because when people stop talking, that's when the chances of something much worse happening, like a military strike, go way, way up.
So, where do we go from here? That's the million-dollar question, right? You've got military tensions cranked up to 11, and the diplomatic route is basically a dead end. What's the next move?
And we have to remember, this isn't happening in a vacuum. The background situation is already pretty grim. There's a ceasefire in the region that's, let's just say, barely holding on. Both sides are already pointing fingers, accusing the other of violations. So this incident, it's like pouring a whole can of gasoline on a fire that was already starting to burn.
So, when you put it all together, the seizure, the threats, the talks falling apart, it really all boils down to one thing. There's a very clear choice on the table. And it really feels like we're balanced on a knife's edge. Is this thing going to spiral into a direct head-on confrontation? Or is there any way, any path at all back to the negotiating table? Right now, nobody knows. And with tensions in the Strait of Hormuz as high as they are, the future of the entire region is just hanging in the balance.